Hey, it's E.B. Moss, and this is episode 40 in season 2 of Insider Interviews with media marketing and advertising executives. And today, you're getting some inside scoop from experts in the podcasting world. I ran a panel recently at a conference called PopCon, which is sort of like Comic-Con with a lot of cosplay, but a lot of celebrities. And we had a day dedicated to some podcasters who joined me on stage to talk about making, marketing, and monetizing your podcast. So while I talk about this a lot, I got them to talk about it on this panel, which we recorded for you, thanks to the fabulous Ty King. Ty and I are on the board of governors of the Podcast Academy, and if you really want to learn about podcasting, I highly recommend a membership in that. It's only $100 a year, and you'll be part of a terrific community that is designed to support, educate, and amplify podcasting. My panelists included Brittany Bigelow, most recently of Audio Chuck, home to Crime Junkies, the true crime podcast, and now she's the founder and creative director of Bigelow Creative. Next up is Dawn Michelle Lewis, and she calls herself the actor you never heard of, although you probably will soon. She's got an award-nominated podcast, and she is the host of Dawn of an Icon and the founder of Salutations Media and Mosaic Monocle. Then Vergie, or V. Rodriguez. She is a filmmaker. She's known for dancing in some Prince and Beyonce videos, and she's the host of also an award-winning podcast, Race of Your Own. Finally, James Starace. He is the VP of Business Operations and Partnerships at Focus 360, which owns Creator Square. And what they do is they help drive revenue to YouTube creators, aka video podcasters. But is it a podcast if it's just video? Is it audio only? We find out as we kick off episode 40 with this panel of experts. A really annoying question that we in the industry debate all the time is a YouTube video still a podcast? So I think that we're all going to say yes. Does anybody disagree? Oh, Brittany's on the fence. You and I both winced.
I'm not against it.
I
just think it has to be distributed on an audio platform.
Yes, I'm very much an audio first person, and I don't think your podcast should need a video. Like, you don't give a demonstration. That's very opinionated.
I think it should be on video, and if you have the resources, and if the format works for video, I think content needs to be driven by the content itself, and then the platform should be ultimately decided on based on where the content is going to thrive. But I do think a podcast has to be distributed on audio platforms, and it can be on video too, of course.
Yeah. And the thing is that YouTube is the biggest place for discovering a new podcast. So if you're an audio-first podcast and you're not also creating video, strongly recommend it. And if you're an independent creator who is primarily leading with video, that's fine too. Then you probably also want to amplify it via audio as well. And then you want to call James at Creator Square and get repped. So the topic today is making, marketing, and monetizing your podcast. And I want to kind of start in that order. So I'm going to go down the row, and Brittany, I'm going to tee you up first and ask you, how do you start a podcast from concept first? So you have an idea, like the great tap room, that. And when we walked in, they said it's about everything.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a very broad podcast. What do you think in general about being really broad, or does a podcast these days with 4 billion of them need to be more niche in order to succeed?
It's a good question. I'm a very strategy first creator and producer. So when I meet with a lot of my clients, and even, working on Crime Junkie, which was a success by the time I had gotten there, I just helped scale it. But I think every podcast has to have a clear goal. And then from there, you could really do whatever you want with it. If your goal is to be in the top whatever, okay, then you work backwards, I think, from that to say, how do I claim a space that maybe is unclaimed, or how do I take the space that maybe would be claimed because you feel that you can do it in a more elevated or whatever authentic way. But I don't think every goal of every podcast should be to make money.
I have to agree. Anybody else? B?
For me, I came up with the title from watching, it was a world champion race for Madlevi Paulino, who won the 400 meter for the Dominican Republic, and it was the first time a world champ. And one of the sportscasters said, she's just in a race of her own. And I literally lifted that and used it as the title for my podcast, and then said, if I were to make a story about people and learning about people, how do I tie that into what I'm trying to say? Because mental health and emotional health is so important, I feel. So that's what I wanted to make it about. So I was really clear on that. How I was going to do it, I had no idea. But the inspiration came from watching a race. And it was really impactful for me because she had won the gold medal the first time for that country. So there was something behind that for me.
And then you won 2 medals.
And then I won 2 medals.
See how that works? Okay.
I'm going to be a hypocrite and say that when you're starting a podcast, you should start from what you know, or at least something that you're passionate about. So my first podcast was a history podcast. I am not a historian. I just really like history. And every single person I had on my podcast was actually an expert in history. And I didn't know that until they were on and we were talking about it. But I think for anybody, that's a good starting point. But you do still need to find some kind of a niche.
Yeah.
Because even true crime, I know I listen to a bunch of them. And I feel like they all still have their own personality, their own voice, their own thing. Yeah, that makes them theirs.
I agree. I teach creating podcasts primarily for businesses, and my first question in the development is why? Why do you want to start a podcast? And so, as I think Brittany said, it shouldn't necessarily be because you want to make money. The odds are pretty slim unless you find a niche. And James is going to talk more about monetization after we kind of get through a little bit of the making of it. So once we have a concept, let's talk a little bit about some of the technical execution. So you could take your phone and you could speak into it. You could plug a little mic into it and you could crank out a podcast. But what are some of the best practices? Who wants to take this? What equipment do we start with at the bare bones? And let's add on from there, V.
I just went kind of straight on. I started looking at podcast studios in my area and put a little budget aside for that because I knew what I wanted it to look like and I knew what I wanted it to sound like. If I was going to put it up on a Spotify or whatever platform that has podcasts audio-wise, I wanted to make sure they had the right mics and that the sound and they knew what they were doing. And, if we needed to edit something, I was going to have those sound files sound a certain way. Same thing with the videos. I found studios that were either experienced or starting out and would collaborate with me and stuff like that. Again, once I got it up, I didn't know what the response was going to be. I had no idea, right? So that was the other thing. I'm like, I could just be spending money on this and have no idea what this is. But once I started putting shorts up, I started realizing that I was getting, for me, it was a lot. I thought I was going to get 50 views. I got 600 views on one of my first shorts. And I was like, oh.
Like quality in, quality out.
Right.
Right? So I think the recommendation is get the best equipment you can afford, at least to get started with. The first thing that I started with was a little lavalier kit. Those are the mini microphones that plugged into my iPhone. I recorded my first 65 episodes with some of the biggest executives in media on these 2 little, what's called dual lavaliers. So 1 wire, 2 little mics, clipped them on. Now I have $125 Hollyland is the brand that I just bought that are wireless mic, same concept, and then the bottom plugs into my iPhone. I downloaded a little recording app that works great, and then we'll talk about how we edit it, but Dawn Michelle also has a suggestion.
I have notes in my phone for microphones specifically, because you're going to want a dynamic microphone. You're also going to want something called cardioid. So essentially, in the world of microphones, you want the one that you have to talk directly into, and it's not going to pick up sound behind it. So that's going to be your ideal. I mean, if we're just going basic tech, that's all I'll say on that one.
I am of the camp of you just need a really good room. I think that a really good room can go a really long way when you're not able to spend the type of money that I think it does take to sound like the top whatever percent of podcasts. And at the same time, the resources that now exist and the people who are experts in tech, the way that you can so quickly find online, like the best bang for your buck is beyond what it was, however many years ago. And I'm so unforgiving of not great audio, but I do think we underestimate the power of a really good room.
So when you're in that decent room where it's not too echoing like this, and you look at your background and you look at and we're assuming that you're also going to do video, at least in my book. You look at how much headroom there is and your head's not cut off in the screen or whatever. I record in something called Descript, Descript. There's a great competitive site called riverside.fm, and it's much better than just recording in something like Zoom. You want something that's specialized, and these generally cost anywhere between $15 and $30 a month as a subscription fee for almost real-time uploading of your recording. So it's like being Zoom, but on steroids. And then some of them have really great editing tools associated with it too. Anybody else?
I just want to agree and say Descript is definitely a superior program. It's my favorite, and it's one that when I do have clients that still use Zoom, and they don't wear a microphone or headphones or anything, have terrible audio, it has tools to fix that. And it's a lifesaver.
Now we kind of know how to capture it, and you can also use these tools to edit. We can talk about that a little bit more, but I want to get into the marketing so that we can learn how to make money off of it too with James. I'm going to go down the row. Brittany, how do you get it out there?
Well, if we had the answer to that, we'd all have a #1 podcast. But this is the name of the game. It's visibility. And so I think that in terms of how you get there, I also think you work backwards from what makes your content unique and what you're trying to accomplish with it. Because to me, podcast is marketing in and of itself, which goes back into not every podcast is out in the world to make money. Sometimes it's an extension of your brand to get people in your door, even if that means you get 100 listens a week. You have 100 people who now know about your business who didn't know about it before. Who cares if you make $5 off of it? I do think that as much as you can be on other people's podcasts, as much as you can be leveraging SEO, and this is where don't come for me with AI right now, but ChatGPT is your friend. Ask ChatGPT how they would get your podcast out in the world. Where are people showing up? How are people finding their podcasts? And that gives a thought partner to you when we're all banging our heads against the wall. Being like, how can someone find my podcast? It's a challenge. There's many places that you just want to be throwing yourself, I think, as much as you can in people's faces and in their ears in a bunch of different avenues, and then figuring out where you're getting the most bang for your buck, and then keep investing in that angle or alley, if you will.
Yeah, mine's probably about the same. 90% of the podcasts that I've worked on are for businesses, and they use their podcast as a networking tool. I don't know what's with attorneys and having podcasts. I know, it's a referral source. It's really great for them in their business, so they don't actually care about the podcast. Either way, it works for their business. But as far as actual creator content and everything, I'm just going to echo what you said, which is borrow other people's audiences, but also just from my producer end, I'm a big fan of also give your guests, if they're on your show, give them stuff to market your show. give them their graphics, give them the social media clips, coordinate with them on how to share on their social platforms so that you can really use as much as their audience as you can. Even if they have like a small group of people that follow them, they're still more than one.
Both of those things, yes. But for me, it's about what do I want to hear, right? What do I want to learn, right? So if I'm on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube and I see a short and I see somebody having a conversation about something and I'm like, that's really interesting, but they didn't ask this question. Who would I want to talk about this? Or if there's something I've shot and maybe one of my guests shot that, I lived that and use that as like as a short and as a way to market it. Again, YouTube is a great platform to just like do research and see. I just had a guest in November and they had a film that came out on Paramount Plus. Well, I cut a short and I edited some of like the clips from the TV show that they did earlier, and I ran that as a short. I know, I was like, is it cheating? I don't know. I used it. I was like, I used it. I don't know, it worked. And it started, so it hit when his episode came out, and then it started hitting numbers again as we shared it again in promotion around the movie, because there's like a whole other marketing machine going on with the movie. So I got the movie to reshare it, their Instagram page. So, and it just started to catch numbers on Reels again. So, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's an extra 3,000 views, not bad. So again, just finding those things too, if you know that you have people on or there's something coming up. Again, I launched mine around Hispanic Heritage Month. I realized people were hungry for that kind of content. They wanted to know who are some people in the Hispanic industry doing what, talking about what. That was just my thing. That was my niche. But as I expanded the podcast, I stepped away from that and started exploring other avenues and other stories.
James, now we've got some decent content out there. You've got creators who are getting notoriety. What do you advise them on to be marketable to a brand? What are best practices? How do you get brands interested?
Well, one thing is consistency, posting consistently. So if it's once a month or once a week, consistency is always good. If you've got like 20 episodes in the can, you don't want to drop 19 on Monday and then one the next Monday. You really want to spread it out. But if you have 20 in the can, that's good. That's a lot of work. But we definitely want to post consistently. Other things is it may not make sense for your content, but be brand friendly as a rule. You don't want to be flagged on YouTube or anything like that for something that you say that's disparaging or seen as negative. And also, you may find if you're getting some traction that a brand reaches out to you, they will be there tomorrow. They send out 10,000 emails in a blast. And if you do get an email from a brand and say, Firestone wants to be linked to the Gray's podcast, Chapter Pod. So they'll be gone tomorrow. They were looking for 100 podcasts to answer, and if 80 answer in the first hour and 20 answer in the third hour, 24 hours from now, that money will be gone. It'll be spent on it. If you do get some reach out, and some reach out may be phony, but you gotta have to use your guys and maybe Google them and make sure that they don't have any strikes against the Better Business Bureau or something like that. But if their money reaches to you, jump on it. One of the things that my company does is reach out to the money first so that you can curate who responds back.
One of the things that we talk about also, James, is being authentic in your likes, your dislikes, brands that you're passionate about, and a little bit of what we call a loss leader. So maybe plug a brand that you love working with or want to work with, whether it's a certain clothing brand or a cleaning product or whatever it is. Throw them a little bit of a bone and talk about it. And that enables the reps to show that you're authentic about this interest. Think about what your genre is and brainstorm what brands might be appropriate for that. James has a creator, for example, who is a dad. So he's talked about trying to find toy companies, even though his topic might be about sports or cars or whatever, he's still a dad and sometimes talks about his kid. So, it's all contextual. That's a big word in our industry, right?
You don't endorse anything you don't want to endorse.
Exactly.
It's your channel, and you have to like what you're endorsing.
The other thing is, V talked about helping your guests to help you. So give them all the assets that you can, that they can then repurpose. I send my guests an annoying amount of assets. I send them about 6 pages that includes images of quotes from the podcast that are sized for stories, for Facebook, for X, for whatever. It takes me more time than I have to really do it with the hopes that they're going to push it out, because it's so about help me to help you to help the podcast grow. Brittany, I'm going to toss this to you, and then we'll go to you, Don Michelle, about monetizing. You did work with one of the top podcasts in the country. So how did you have to kind of suck up to brands? What did the Crime Junkies host have to think about? And what's the experience of getting a brand in the show?
I think it's an ever-changing landscape, which is why it can be very challenging. And advertisers are spending less to get more right now. They want to own multiple channels. They don't just want the placement on the podcast. They want your social channels. They want a YouTube. They want placement. And there's a lot of resistance, I think, at least I experienced it, of, wait, what has changed? How did we go from you getting ad placement to now you want my social channels for X amount of time, but you're not willing to increase the spend? So I think that was a challenge. And then also you have to keep in mind that brands are owned by bigger brands. And so looking at example, working for a true crime podcast, Clorox did not want to be necessarily associated with true crime content. You can fill in whatever blanks you want there. Clorox is also, if I remember correctly, don't come for me if I'm wrong, but I do believe Burt's Bees is owned by the same, or represented by the same agency, let's say, as Clorox, which then makes, even though Burt's Bees has nothing to do with Clorox, they then will pull back from that opportunity because of the association with the advertiser. I also find working with advertisers, no offense, to be a lot of dating, and I don't love to date. And so I'm like, at some point, we're gonna have to seal the deal here, and we're gonna have to stop doing this thing over and over again for 2 years. And that was really interesting. I think that was a big surprise. For what it's worth, too, every top podcast is unhappy with the amount that they're selling. So I think Crime Junkies just surpassed Joe Rogan when it comes to audio consumption. So as the #1 podcast in the country, there were still so many conversations of why are we only selling 80%? Why are we only selling X amount of percent? And it's because we're in a really, really young industry, and because people are trying to discover how their dollar is actually bringing dollars in, and you still haven't quite cracked it. So don't get too down on yourself when you're trying to get that money to come in.
So there are distribution platforms that will monetize on your behalf. The only problem with that is then you don't control what ads are being played on your podcast. So that's a fun one. One thing that I've started leveraging recently, because I produce a lot of business podcasts, is I will actually ask the guest if they would like to sponsor one episode. Just start with one. See how it goes. You give me your referral code, whatever you want. We will even include it. Like, there's a whole package for it. And so far, even my shows, and only get like 30, not 30,000, 30 downloads have paid for themselves in 1 month of podcasting. And then, of course, in this case, every time I pitch it to a guest that they're promoting their own business, their own company, it's like, okay, well, you're already being interviewed, so maybe don't sponsor your own episode. How about we place you in the episode afterwards? It's double bang for your buck. So there's unique ways that you can really get into leveraging monetizing the show.
There are some phrases that, most in the audience might know, some might not, but there's something called a pre-roll, right? That's the ad that comes right before the main content starts. There's a mid-roll, which is proven to be the most effective for advertisers because you're in the middle of the content. And then there's the post-roll, which is the thank you very much, we were brought to you by, which is typically going to pay the least and is not as effective because, you know, if you're getting listeners to stick with one episode for about 70% of your show, that's really good. If they make it all the way to the end, you must be walking on water. James? No. James, can you talk a little bit about what size audience do you have to have before you can typically monetize it?
What are called micro podcasts are 10,000 subscribers to 100,000. And so what a research company called Podstrat found is that those are the most cost-effective podcasts for brands. Their cost per thousand is a little lower, so that makes it a little more efficient. And the connection with the host to the live read of a product endorsement seems to be more genuine, and the listeners of a micro podcast are considered to be more in tune with that host. It's a very important relationship, and they actually convert to buying those products more rapidly. So what we look for when we try to monetize is that micro listener. So we're not looking for this gigantic home run of 800,000 subscribers or whatnot. We're looking for these up-and-coming shows that have as little as 10,000 subscribers. And some of our sports channels that we have went from 20,000 to 40,000. One of our movie reaction channels just went from 90,000 to 105,000. So they're good channels, and they're getting a lot of views, and they have a lot of fan reaction. So those are the things that we look for. People that put comments in the YouTube or comments in the Spotify, if it's which Spotify allows for audio. And that interaction with the fans or the listeners and consumers, viewers, that's what we're looking for. That's what we find most in what advertisers call micro podcasts. So that's what we're trying to monetize. And one of the things that they'll say about a big podcast like Joe Rogan or Pod Save America or the Daily, New York Times Daily, is that, yeah, they've got the hugest audience, but you got to pay for it all. And you get a lot of transient listeners who don't listen every day, so they'll miss your commercial. And they're not as linked into the host as you would think because they're so big that they're getting this whole wash of viewers that they'll in and out. And they charge the highest CPM, cost per thousand. So you get kind of run higher cost and lower conversion rates.
So just that's a little bit more on the video podcast side of things. If you have fewer audio listeners, you can still make money. And what James was referring to, if you missed it, that CPM or cost per thousand means that my math is really bad, so somebody else do this. But if you have an average of 5,000 listens per episode, the average cost per thousand is about $20 to $25. If you're doing really well and you're having high engagement, maybe you can get that up a little bit more. But then you divide that 5,000 by $25 per thousand, so you're getting about $125, right? Sure. I told you. Failed math 3 times. Yeah. So that's why, as we said in the beginning of this, don't really anticipate that you're going to retire off of your podcast anytime soon. And that's going to take it all the way back to the top of what we said originally. Why are you making a podcast? Is it your passion? Godspeed. It's awesome. It's such a great business to be in. It's so much fun. You feel like you have so much power when you own this microphone right here. Just saying.
The one thing we didn't touch on are subscribers and having any kind of like a subscription network. So even if you have a small audience, that you have your Patreon, you have your Supercast, and if you're able to offer them exclusive content like, oh, there's a bonus episode, but you pay us $1 a month to get these extra episodes, that's another one that I've seen that people have used to monetize.
Well, we were going to talk about alternate ways of monetizing a podcast. Mine is a business podcast, and you don't pay to be a guest, you pay me to write a companion journalistic article based on the episode. And that comes back to also what you were saying about for a business podcast that's used as a marketing tool, to my business major friend over there, to put an executive's thought leadership out there in the world. So what other ways have you monetized things?
Probably not the best one to answer like the scope, but I think your point about the subscribers is really important. I think especially for Crime Junkie, that's what I think really caught people's attention, was when all of a sudden they saw they had 100,000 fan club members, and at a minimum, those 100,000 are paying $5 a month. So yeah, I was too. Then I do think visibility leads to the income. So I'm working with a creator right now who's about to go on a tour. You will not make money realistically from a tour, let's say, and maybe your audience isn't big enough for necessarily that, but it is big enough for a meetup of some kind, right? And that live tour is a meetup, right? But ultimately the exposure and the press opportunities, because it can, especially on a weekly grind, it can become a challenge of how you continue to become visible. So any press-worthy opportunities, which is why the paramount of it all, is the way to go, because that's how you get also, if you have a back catalog, I think we underestimate the power of the back catalog and to monetize the back catalog. So if you can resurrect as much content as humanly possible at any possible opportunity, that's also an opportunity to monetize.
Yeah, I realize I'm still learning the monetization journey, and so I'm looking to speak to all of you about that. But finding other opportunities, like being able to do a red carpet, that fits into what I'm talking about, or a local event or a PopCon, right? And maybe there's some creators here that I would have wanted to interview. And now talking to the Paramount folks and saying like, hey, we sent this, it's doing well, just so you know, like it's here. And it hits their radar. So, and even people like nostalgic stuff. So I've noticed even that same guest danced for Madonna. I resurrected an old Madonna music video that he was in, and we did a little short that did well too. So just all of that is just like learning how to, like, the scope of like, I'm only staying in this podcast world, but then there's this whole other like press world and other ways to kind of build off of that too.
The other thing that I just want to add on the marketing side of things, because true confession, I do some social media on behalf of Creator Square. And so I really love what they're doing. They are accessible, they're small enough to work with micro influencers, but they're big enough to work with big brands and get them placement. And so what we try to do is not only promote all of the podcasters through all social media channels, but also to engage with the people who are liking, sharing, etc. So the reason when James said that sort of smallish size, even if it's 100,000, the reason why they do so well is because fans feel like they're heard, because it's still accessible enough to engage with your listener population. Like, you started your podcast not too long ago. It's pretty niche. You've already been mentioned in People magazine. So any advice, if you shout from the stands, about how you got some kind of exposure like that?
Yeah, throwing as much pasta at the wall as possible. I didn't let any doors close in my face. You get a lot of no's, but there's that like hilarious Lady Gaga quote that's like, there could be 100 people in a room. 99 people aren't going to see you, but there's one person in the room who will see you. You got to find that one person. And I really believe that one person is out there for everyone. It is a niche show. And top podcasters told me I would never have a big audience. And they weren't wrong, but I did find a niche audience that really enjoys the work that I do. It's about abandoned buildings that I explore, and I take people into my imagination as I explore them.
Thank
you. Great idea. Yeah. Great idea.
Any questions? Yes.
When it comes to the podcast brand, and I guess I'm asking about the repetitive things that you do in each episode, like your theme song or music, sound effects, your intro. Could you talk a little bit about how you determine what those elements are going to be, and like whether you have a catchphrase or not, or whether you have transition specific section names? Like, how do you decide what kind of podcast?
I love talking branding. I think, so what you're going to do for video is going to be very different than what you're going to do for audio because of the way that the algorithm serves it. And that's where I do think there is a challenge between not every podcast is meant to be that same podcast on video. So now you're producing two different pieces of content. I think your audience kind of has to decide some of this for you. And I think that that's always a challenge when you're building the audience, but sometimes like we can get very sticky. And like, I will say that some of the Crime Junkie, like the life rules and some of the isms that Ashley and Britt have, the audience picked up on them. They listened. Keeping in mind, there's always the dialogue that you're having. If you have a guest, obviously that's a beautiful equation for new listeners, but they didn't have that. Their third person in the conversation is the person they can't see or hear, right? But they created channels to have that conversation with them. And they're like, oh, they love it when I say bananas. And, oh my God, so now we're going to put that on a piece of merch, or we're going to brand this thing around it. I also am someone that if it's a little too, I don't want to expect the same thing at the exact same time. And then from an advertiser, I'm like, if I know that you're going to tee up your ad for me, I'm already hitting 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, and I'm skipping it. So you almost want to like gaslight me into not knowing when something's coming. And I also think that's your best way to know what's working. If you get too stuck in the like, we always do this segment or theme, which I'm a big Swiftie, and I'm a big Kelsey Brothers fan, but I think they're kind of getting in that too, where it's become very segmented because they have to have something to sell. And they sell the segments, which I understand. So it is this fine line. You got to be able to give that structure for someone to buy, but then you don't want it to just be the like, we're clocking into our new news, here we go, even though I'm still freaking watching it, so they're bamboozling me. But those are my 2 cents.
I think for me, it ended up happening on my first episode because I was keeping it in mind and I just couldn't come up with anything. And there was one of my guests that was like, always ask some sort of question at the end, right? Like always end on the same thing, whatever it is, right? And he would tell me which podcast to watch that were doing it and doing it well. So since my title is A Race of Your Own, I ask each guest, and this just came out in the first episode and I just kept it. I was like, in life, you go up, you go down, you plateau. Sometimes you're just in life and there's just tumbleweeds. What would you say? What would you tell people to stay in a race of their own? And I keep that, and then it kind of plugs the title, right? And so it kind of brings it full circle. So anything that you can use that will bring it full circle back to your title, back to your branding, back to your website is kind of the way I did it. And then I asked that question every episode. I just stuck with it.
So I'm pro theme songs. So like for Dawn of an Icon, I found somebody who writes jingles. And so anytime you open my podcast, it gets stuck in your head. And I'm not sorry about it. But for business podcasts, usually I try to keep something short and sweet at the beginning that just gives you an idea of what you're about to get into, but also allows the audience to know what show they're actually listening to. And then for the end of a show, that's where you're supposed to stick your call to action. Like, okay, well, and this is where you find us. This is where you find the guests. Like, those are the only things that I really stick to. Everything else, it's like pasta. You throw it at the wall and see what sticks.
Could you give advice to someone who's like recording their first can of 5 or 6 episodes before we launch?
So when you're editing, because of how the algorithms are now set up when they're suggesting a show for people, my recommendation for most people, and this is how I now edit most of my shows, is find your hook for the show, stick it right at the top. Because when Spotify or something is automatically playing your show because it was suggested, because they're like, hey, you listen to this podcast, you should try this one. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten shows that I've never downloaded, but I get stuck listening to them.
Really just like plucking whatever was the zinger
Yeah.
and just throwing it at them.
It doesn't even have to be 10 whole seconds. It can just be the one thing that somebody hears it and they're like, I should check this out.
So just to 101 it a little bit in terms of your questions, that's called a cold open. And so that's like probably lifting something that was the most interesting thing said without giving away the shop, but drawing in that listener and sticking it at the top of the episode. Can you believe Mary said that to Bob? Bob, I thought his eyes were going to pop out of his head. and then you start the show, hey, this is E.B. Moss, and da-da-da-da-da. So that's one approach, is a cold open. Not everybody does that. I prefer that because, again, they're going to fast forward through the same old intro if they know my show. The other thing I wanted to come back to is just real practically, there are specific standards about the art that you create for your podcast. And again, I think maybe Brittany or Don Michelle, you said, go ahead and use ChatGPT. And
One of my best friends.
yeah, find out. Well, we were at the awards last night. Yay, Ty won an award. And I think that Brad in the back said, if it was AI generated, don't tell us because we want to award original art. But Apple sets the standard for the size and like the pixel size and the dimensions. So that's the, standard bearer. And then best practices, I think, are also to create episode art per episode instead of just always plugging the same one in. Final thoughts, anybody? You've got 10 seconds each. James?
Let me just talk a little bit about YouTube. Make sure your thumbnail picture is excellent.
Yeah.
That brings in the YouTube views.
I agree, but also just watch what other people are doing. And watch the greats. Watch the Diane Sawyers. Watch the Oprah interview. Watch all of that. That all helps too in giving you ideas what to explore.
Find shows you like. Copy their formats. There's nothing that says that you're not allowed to do that. I mean, I started based on My Favorite Murder, okay? And I don't have a true crime podcast. So steal from other people, but like ethically.
Valid. I'll actually piggyback on what you just said. If you, as a small or medium-sized creator, which is very different in podcast than it is YouTube, which is why I think it's a missed opportunity if you're only a video podcast. You probably could be making more money in audio if you were publishing it. You have to play by the platform rules more than the big guys do. When I started with Crime Junkie, we were not doing episode art. They didn't know the specs. So play by all the rules and then do your own thing too.
And then I will just repeat the fact that we're done. We're done. Don't forget your show notes, right? So repurpose your show notes and push them out. SEO, search engine optimization. Thank you so much for all your time and your ears and your eyes. And James has mints for everyone. Well, I hope you got some good insider scoop from this episode of Insider Interviews with me, E.B. Moss. If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/mossappeal. And I hope you'll follow Insider Interviews on social media and let me know if you have a question or a suggestion for a next stellar guest in media marketing and advertising. Speaking of stellar, my theme music was composed and performed by the incomparable Grammy-winning John Clayton. If I can help you with your company's podcast, please find me at mossappeal.com. Thanks again for listening.